What if I told you that one of the Bible's most heartwarming stories, the tale of Ruth and Boaz, secretly encodes the timing and events of the rapture, that moment when believers are said to be suddenly taken to meet Christ? Online, many are convinced that this ancient narrative of loyalty and redemption is actually a hidden prophetic map, its symbols pointing directly to the church's escape before a great tribulation, a divine clue hidden in plain sight. Or is there more to this beloved book than a single sensational interpretation? And could the real hidden meanings be even more profound? If you've seen those Bible code videos where ancient texts supposedly predict very specific future world events, you know how divisive and sometimes confusing they can be. Believers often feel caught between intriguing hype and a healthy skepticism. Is the book of Ruth really primarily about the rapture? Or is this another case of forcing modern ideas onto ancient texts? Today, we cut through the noise. We won't just tell you about the theory, we'll equip you with the historical context and interpretive tools to judge it for yourself. Our goal is discernment. Here at Bible Galaxy, our approach to such intriguing biblical claims is always a deep dive, balancing fascination with in-depth scholarly exploration. Today, we're not just scratching the surface of the rapture encoded in Ruth theory. We're going to unpack it, understand its appeal, and critically examine it. But to do that responsibly, to truly understand if and how Ruth speaks prophetically, we must first immerse ourselves in its original world. We need to uncover the missing layers, the historical context, the ancient customs, and the primary theological messages that the original audience would have understood. Only then can we fairly assess any subsequent symbolic interpretations. This is the Bible Galaxy commitment, providing clarity and deep understanding. If you're ready to journey with us, to explore both the viral theories and the rich foundational truths of the Book of Ruth like never before, then hit that subscribe button now and ring the notification bell. You won't want to miss this deep dive. The Book of Ruth itself, a concise yet profoundly rich narrative, is traditionally nestled within the Old Testament, a literary gem from the turbulent days when the judges judged ancient Israel. At its core, it's a masterpiece of Hesed, that untranslatable Hebrew blend of loyalty, love, and relentless kindness, showing God's providence in ordinary lives. It's a story of famine, loss, unwavering loyalty between two women, Naomi and her Moabite daughter-in-law Ruth, and a remarkable redemption orchestrated by a righteous man named Boaz in the small town of Bethlehem. But could this beautiful account of human relationships and divine faithfulness also hold specific end-time keys? So, here's our journey for today. First, we'll respectfully explore that tantalizing Rapture Code theory. What are its core claims? Then, we'll step back into ancient Israel, uncovering the vital historical and cultural context of Ruth. We'll then look at its primary theological messages before returning to explore various symbolic interpretations, including a nuanced analysis of the rapture typology and the principles of biblical interpretation that guide us. By the end, you won't just understand the rapture in Ruth theory. You'll be equipped to discern any biblical claim with historical rigor and theological wisdom. Before we can truly assess any hidden codes or prophetic layers in the Book of Ruth, we must first walk the dusty roads of ancient Bethlehem in its original setting. Understanding the world Ruth, Naomi, and Boaz inhabited, its laws, its social structures, its very heartbeat, is essential. This historical tapestry isn't just background, it's the canvas upon which their extraordinary story of Hesed and redemption is painted, and the foundation for any deeper meaning we might seek. The very first verse of Ruth anchors us, in the days when the judges judged. This era, stretching roughly from the mid-14th to the mid-11th century BCE, was a turbulent chapter in Israel's history. The Book of Judges sums it up. Everyone did as they saw fit. Moral decay led to cycles of oppression. Famine drove Naomi from House of Bread, Bethlehem, and war loomed constantly. A land starved for stability, lacking a central monarch, tribal disunity was rampant. Against this grim backdrop of violence and spiritual decline, the Book of Ruth emerges like a sunny oasis. Its peaceful, integrity-filled narrative stands in stark contrast, suggesting that even amidst national failure, God's redemptive purposes advance through the faithfulness of ordinary individuals, preparing the way for a more stable future and ultimately for the Davidic monarchy, a lineage Ruth herself would enter. The narrative of Ruth is deeply embedded in ancient Israelite social and legal customs. Without understanding these, the character's actions can seem perplexing. Why does Boaz risk his wealth and reputation for Ruth, a foreign widow? Enter the kinsman redeemer, or Goel. The Goel was typically the closest male relative responsible for rescuing family members from hardship. A primary duty was land redemption, buying back ancestral land sold due to poverty. He could also redeem relatives from slavery. And crucially for Ruth, his role often extended to ensuring a deceased kinsman's lineage continued. The Goel was a restorative agent, reflecting God himself, who is called Israel's Goel. Now this custom of lineage continuation explains Ruth's bold move at the threshing floor later in the story. She wasn't just being forward, she was invoking a sacred duty linked to levirate marriage, or yibum. If a man died childless, his brother was obligated to marry the widow. Their first son would carry on the deceased brother's name and inherit his property, providing social and economic protection for the widow and preserving the family line. Boaz wasn't a brother, but his actions mirror this spirit for a more distant kinsman. Then there were gleaning rights for the poor. The law commanded landowners not to harvest every last bit. The edges, the dropped sheaves, these were for the poor, widows, orphans, and foreigners like Ruth, allowing them to work for their food with dignity. Ruth's diligent gleaning shows her character, Boaz's righteousness, and becomes the setting for their divine encounter. Land ownership and inheritance were also sacred. Land was a divine gift, a perpetual inheritance. Naomi, having lost her husband and sons, was in danger of losing her family's ancestral land. This makes Boaz's act of redeeming it so crucial. Finally, consider the social status of widows and foreigners, especially Moabites. Widows and foreigners were vulnerable. Moabites in particular faced restrictions. Deuteronomy 23 famously excluded them from the assembly of the Lord. This makes Ruth's story even more radical. Ruth, the Moabite, legally excluded, divinely included. Her story doesn't just foreshadow Gentile salvation, it enacts it, centuries before the cross, a stunning testament to God's inclusive grace when an individual demonstrates genuine faith and unwavering loyalty. Now remember Ruth's midnight plea to Boaz at the threshing floor, her daring request, "I am Ruth, your servant. Spread your wing over your servant, for you are a redeemer." Now that we grasp these intricate customs, the Goel's duty, the spirit of Yibum, the significance of covering, her words ignite with new meaning. This isn't just ancient romance, it's a profound legal and spiritual cry for Goel redemption. This rich context makes Boaz's subsequent actions seismic. It reveals why scholars through history saw messianic patterns here, and why modern interpreters spot rapture codes in this very scene, and even rapture codes embedded within this very scene. To fully appreciate those layers and the book's primary message, we must also explore its brilliant literary artistry and its deep theological heart. This world, with its specific challenges and customs, is the very stage upon which these unfold. Beyond its vital historical backdrop, the Book of Ruth is celebrated as a literary gem, a masterpiece of Hebrew narrative art. Its power to move and teach us even millennia later, is intricately tied to how its story is told, its genre, its characters, and its profound theological core. So, what kind of story is Ruth? Scholars often describe it as a historical short story or novella marked by its exceptional artistic quality. In literary terms, a comedy moves from despair to joy, and Ruth masters this, taking us from famine and death to harvest and new life. The characters are richly drawn. Naomi's emotional arc is central, from bitterness to blessedness. Ruth herself is a beacon of hesed, or loyal love. Her courage and faith shine as she seeks refuge under Boaz's cloak, his kanaf, at the threshing floor. Her Moabite identity makes her inclusion extraordinary, and Boaz, the worthy man, embodies integrity and generosity, especially in offering Ruth the protection of his wing-like garment. The plot unfolds with beautiful economy, driven by pivotal dialogue and enriched by wordplay and the symbolic meanings of names, all highlighting the journey from emptiness to fullness. Woven into this literary artistry are profound theological themes. Central is Hesed. This is loyal love, covenant faithfulness, steadfast kindness beyond duty, seen in Ruth's vow to Naomi and Boaz's redemptive actions under his cloak wing. This human Hesed powerfully reflects God's own. This flows into divine providence and the journey from emptiness to fullness. God's guiding hand is subtle, yet unmistakable. Ruth happening into Boaz's field, the harvest timing, all weave emptiness into fullness as God works through ordinary events and faithful choices. Naomi's journey from Mara, bitter, back to Naomi, pleasant, embodies this, culminating in the joy of new life with Obed. Redemption and the inclusion of Gentiles are two sides of one coin here. Redemption in Ruth is multifaceted, social, economic, and for the family line. Ruth, a foreigner from Moab, a nation legally restricted, is personally redeemed and elevated. Her inclusion into Israel and the Davidic lineage isn't just a personal story, it's a radical display of God's expansive grace, powerfully enacting Gentile salvation centuries before Christ. Finally, the exemplary faithfulness and obedience of Ruth and Boaz. Their commitment to act rightly, honoring God's covenant through acts of Hesed, like Boaz offering the covering of his cloak wing, becomes the human channel for divine blessings. This intricate weave of history, literary art, and profound theology makes Ruth a timeless treasure, deeply reflective of God's character. But is this gathering under Boaz's protective wing just symbolic of Hesed and redemption in ancient Israel? Or could Ruth's midnight plea at the threshing floor hold clues to a literal, future divine rescue, a sudden heavenly exit? That's where the Rapture Code theory takes flight, proposing that these very details foreshadow an even greater future event. If Ruth's cry for covering prefigures a future divine rescue, what would that mean for us today? We've explored Ruth's rich historical world, its literary beauty, and its foundational theological messages. Now, as promised, we turn to a specific and intriguing way of reading this ancient story. The view, popular in some Christian circles, especially those adhering to dispensational theology, that the Book of Ruth contains encoded prophecies or types that foreshadow the rapture of the church. This interpretation reads Ruth through a distinct eschatological lens, identifying symbolic parallels between its characters, events, and specific aspects of end-time prophecy. At the heart of this Rapture in Ruth interpretation are several key symbolic equations. Naomi, returning from Moab, is often seen as a type of Israel awaiting future restoration. Ruth, the Moabitess who courageously embraces Naomi's God, is interpreted as a type of the Gentile church, grafted into God's redemptive plan. Boaz, the wealthy, powerful kinsman redeemer, his name meaning "in him is strength," is presented as a clear type of Jesus Christ, the Savior and Bridegroom. The unnamed closer kinsman, who cannot redeem without marring his own inheritance, is often seen as representing the Mosaic law, holy, but ultimately unable to save, thus highlighting Christ's sufficiency. The pervasive harvest setting is viewed symbolically as the end times, a period of divine gathering. Ruth gleaning in Boaz's field is likened to the church's mission during the current age, gathering believers. Proponents of this typology draw upon New Testament passages to support these connections. Ephesians 5 describes Christ as the loving husband of the church. 1 Thessalonians 4 details the rapture event, believers being caught up, harpazo, to meet the Lord. And Revelation 3:10, promising to keep the faithful from the hour of trial, is often seen as a promise of a pre-tribulation rapture. Specific agricultural and temporal details in Ruth are given significant symbolic weight. Ruth's arrival at the barley harvest, Passover firstfruits, is linked to Christ's resurrection, the ultimate firstfruits, sometimes seen as typifying the church age's beginning. Her gleaning continues until the wheat harvest, Pentecost, Shavuot, when the church was inaugurated. Some see Pentecost as a biblically significant time for the rapture itself, marking a harvest completion. The scene at Boaz's threshing floor is pivotal. The threshing floor symbolizes separation, judgment, like the tribulation. Ruth's encounter with Boaz at midnight echoes parables of the bridegroom's unexpected return, Matthew 25:6. Her request for him to spread his kanaf, wing cloak, is seen as the church's plea for redemption and protection. Boaz covering her is equated with Christ gathering or snatching away the church before final judgment. This rapture encoded in Ruth interpretation clearly holds considerable appeal. It offers hope and comfort, especially the prospect of being united with Christ before intense global tribulation. It provides a thrilling sense of discovering hidden meaning, making ancient texts feel incredibly current and relevant to New Testament eschatology. It creates a perceived seamless continuity between Old Testament stories and detailed New Testament prophecies, portraying God's redemptive plan as consistent and intricately woven. And it passionately seeks to highlight Jesus Christ as the ultimate Redeemer and Bridegroom. While these parallels and symbolic connections are striking and deeply meaningful to many, we must also ask, would Ruth's original audience, living centuries before Christ, have understood their story as a detailed end-times prophecy about a future rapture? Or does this specific reading reflect later theological developments and interpretive frameworks? To answer this, we need to delve into the principles of biblical interpretation itself. That vivid picture of Ruth being covered by Boaz's wing, interpreted by some as a snatching away, is a powerful image within the rapture encoded in Ruth theory. But as we seek a deep dive, it's essential to broaden our lens. How does this specific interpretation compare to other symbolic readings of Ruth throughout history? And what principles of biblical interpretation help us navigate these different layers of meaning? Long before the 19th century development of dispensational rapture theology, Christian interpreters, including the early church fathers, saw profound foreshadowings of Christ and the church in the book of Ruth. This broader Christological typology is deeply rooted. Boaz was consistently seen as a powerful type of Christ the Redeemer. His role as Goel, related, able, and willing to pay the price, beautifully prefigured Jesus Christ's redemptive work. Ruth, in this patristic view, often typified the church or the individual believer, particularly highlighting Gentile inclusion. Her journey from Moab to Bethlehem under Boaz's care reflected the believer's journey from sin to salvation. This general typology, seeing Boaz as Christ the Redeemer and Ruth as the redeemed community, has ancient roots, focusing on the accomplished work of Christ. Within Jewish tradition too, Ruth is rich in symbolic meaning. She is revered as the archetypal convert. Her heartfelt declaration is the paradigm of sincere conversion. The custom of reading Ruth during Shavuot, Pentecost, connects her acceptance of Torah with Israel's at Sinai, and both Ruth and Boaz are esteemed as supreme embodiments of Hesed. So, how do we navigate these layers, especially the contrast between early church typology and modern dispensational readings? But here's the critical filter. Valid typology must respect the text's original purpose and meaning for its first audience. Let's apply this to Ruth's midnight plea in Ruth 3:9. Spread the corner of your garment, kanaf, your wing, your cloak, over your servant, for you are a kinsman redeemer. In its original historical and cultural context, Ruth's act was a culturally understood plea for Boaz to fulfill his goal responsibilities, including marriage. The kanaf symbolized his willingness to bring her under his legal protection. This meaning would have been clear. The Rapture reading sees this symbolically. Ruth, the church, seeking covering from Boaz, Christ, signifies a plea for rescue, specifically a pre-tribulation snatching away. The question is, does the text itself, in its original context, support this highly specific eschatological layer, or is it a meaning applied retrospectively based on a later theological system, namely dispensational premillennialism? Valid typology involves divinely intended historical correspondences pointing forward, often affirmed by New Testament authors identifying Old Testament types. However, a key principle is respecting the historical reality and original meaning of the type. Over-allegorization, detached from authorial intent for the original audience, can be problematic. Would ancient Israelites have understood Ruth's request as a rapture code? Almost certainly not, as this specific theological framework developed much later. This doesn't negate all symbolic meaning, but it calls for hermeneutical awareness. We must distinguish what a text meant and what it might foreshadow or has come to mean for later communities. While most scholars see Ruth's primary themes as Hesed and providence, the Rapture reading reflects a distinct modern framework, one that resonates deeply within dispensational theology. Our aim at Bible Galaxy is to provide context, encouraging critical thinking about how we arrive at different interpretations. Perhaps Ruth's greatest genius is this: whether you seek ancient Hesed or future hope, her story draws you deeper into the mystery of redemption. Our journey through the book of Ruth has taken us from its ancient historical setting, through its literary artistry and core theological messages, to the intricate layers of symbolic interpretation it has inspired across millennia. So, how do we bring these diverse strands together in a way that honors the depth of this remarkable book? A Bible Galaxy deep dive always starts with the core, affirming the profound power of the Book of Ruth as a historical narrative, deeply embedded in the challenging world of the Judges. Its primary historically grounded theological themes, the transformative impact of Hesed, God's subtle yet powerful divine providence, the poignant journey from emptiness to fullness, and the radical, compassionate inclusion of Ruth the Moabitess into God's covenant people. These resonate with timeless human experiences and shine as divine truths. This robust foundation is compelling in its own right. From this rich soil, it's natural to acknowledge the richness of typology. Such a compelling story, so deeply reflective of God's character and his redemptive actions, naturally invited further reflection. We've seen how early Jewish interpretations cherished Ruth as the archetypal convert and a model of Hesed, and how long-standing Christian tradition has seen Boaz as a clear type of Christ the Redeemer and Ruth as a type of the church. And then we can address the rapture in Ruth interpretation specifically and respectfully. We've explored its core arguments and its undeniable appeal for many, offering a direct link between this Old Testament narrative and New Testament eschatological hopes. At Bible Galaxy, we contextualize this as a distinct interpretive lens born of dispensational premillennialism. Our goal? To equip you for discernment, honoring textual roots while exploring symbolic fruit, not dismissive debunking. Ultimately, the Book of Ruth is so enduringly powerful precisely because it resonates on multiple levels. One can fully appreciate its historical integrity, its literary artistry, and its primary theological messages of Hesed, divine providence, and redemption without necessarily accepting every specific typological interpretation proposed. Conversely, for those who find particular typological readings spiritually meaningful, a deeper understanding of the original context can enrich rather than diminish that appreciation, revealing the solid historical and theological foundation upon which any subsequent symbolic meaning might be built. Perhaps Ruth's greatest genius is this: whether you seek ancient Hesed or future hope, her story draws you deeper into the mystery of redemption. Its core message about God's faithful love, working through loyal human beings to bring hope and restoration, is a vital truth for all. So, after this deep dive, what are your thoughts? Does Ruth's story primarily offer profound lessons on loyalty and God's providence in difficult times? Or does its intricate narrative indeed prove a pre-tribulation rapture for the church? Comment your take. We'd love to hear your perspectives. Thank you for joining us on this Bible Galaxy deep dive. If this exploration has enriched your understanding of the Book of Ruth, please give this video a like and be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell for more journeys into the fascinating depths of the Bible.